This episode of Where Did the Road Go is brought to you in part by our Patreons. If you want to become a patron, go to wheredidtheroadgo.com. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? Tonight, I have with me Mr. Joshua Cutchin.
Good evening.
And Mr. Adam Sayne.
Hello, everyone. Good to be back.
And,
I feel like I was just here.
Yeah, we're gonna before we jump into the main topic tonight, which is going to be the Skinwalker documentary that's been released. A couple things I want to get to real quick. One, the last show I did with Clint Granberry, Cheryl Lee, who was supposed to be joining us tonight, but I think she fell asleep. She had said when the recording was played that said Layla, her dog Milo growled, and as soon as it stopped, there was a bang behind her, which made her turn and look. And then her bead loom fell off the bookshelf as she watched. The loom had been setting up on top of Jeff Kripal's book, The Supernatural, for a few months. And, yeah. And Milo's her dog, just if I didn't mention that. Milo was listening to what you guys called Whoopie or Wookie as well. I had to turn off the podcast after that because the recordings were bothering her dog so much.
Well, you know those calls from flesh and blood undiscovered primates will do stuff like that.
But it suggests that it's something more than just like a fake recording, you know?
Oh no, certainly. I listen to the companion podcast over on Strange Familiars, and I was really impressed with. I don't think there's any fakery on the part of those recording things. The question is, if it's just some hillbillies making noise, but I don't think that's the case either. It does suggest that there's something genuinely anomalous going on there. Yeah.
But I think hillbillies making noise wouldn't set off the dog. You know what I mean? Especially on a recording. Maybe if the dog was outside and heard that, it'd be one thing, but coming off of a recording, the dog shouldn't act up.
Right.
So the second thing, which is just a quick aside, I mentioned also I've been reading the new John Dies at the End novel, which is done by, I forget the guy's name, but he's one of the writers at Cracked. And as anyone who has looked at Cracked knows, I mean, I enjoy Cracked, but they're definitely of the sort of materialist atheist sort of viewpoint on things. They often like to put up articles debunking all kinds of stuff in their humorous style. So the book, which is called What the Hell Did I Just Read? A Novel of Cosmic Horror, is excellent. The ideas in it are incredible. I enjoyed it thoroughly, but at the end there's this little afterwards. And he explains to people that this is fiction. He does not investigate the paranormal, so please don't write him with this stuff. And he says, if you think you're seeing things that, qualify as supernatural or paranormal, you should see a doctor because you have something wrong with you.
Oh man, so this episode is gonna be broadcast for radio, right?
Yes.
So I can't say my actual reaction, which involves an F and the word off, right?
And I'm just like, wow. So basically you're saying anyone that's had a weird experience is mentally ill.
Yeah, I think that this is the next big push that should be happening. In the light of such things as real phenomena as mansplaining and as talking down to people, of different minorities and such. I sort of addressed this in a recent blog post. We need something that can address skeptic explaining. I don't know if it's Randy explaining or cynic explaining or something, but there's this point in the conversation where somebody's talking to you and they're like, there's this thing called sleep paralysis, and you're 5 minutes beyond that point in the conversation. Right. It's just and it's this idea that no, trust me, I know you're cute. I know that you think that you're having these experiences, but you're not really. And everybody better be glad that this episode is going out over the airwaves, because I would be unleashing some blue language, that's for sure.
And
Yes. Okay, you're saying that's the same guy that wrote the John Dies at the End
Yeah,
books?
yeah, it was the author. So it was just this little afterword
And,
at the
and
end.
he's saying that, and I've never read the books, but Rob has read them, and he told me that it's all about like Fortiana, and
Yeah.
that's what it's all based on.
It's well, sort of. I mean, it's his invention of Fortiana. It doesn't follow anything real.
Okay.
Now, to be incredibly fair, like, I think to sort of walk back my my diatribe there for a second, I think that it would behoove anybody who has these things commonly to, in addition to exploring other avenues, also. I'm not saying seek paranormal anomalistic help before you seek medical help, because that's I think that both things happen. But
yeah, absolutely.
But be open to the fact that sometimes strange things happen. You can be completely sane. I mean, I know this guy named Seriah Ascaf that has a lot of things happen to him, and yeah. But that's to that point. I think that every avenue should be explored, but the idea that it must be black or white, either these things happen. These things only happen to people who are mentally insane. Is offensive. It's flat out offensive. Is there a better way to put it?
And that's how I felt about it when at the end there. I was just kind of like, really, dude. Everyone who has weird experiences is mentally ill. Yeah. But
No.
Does
he not know the sheer amount of people that have experiences like this? It doesn't have to be daily, but at least a lot of people at least have one kind of weird experience in their life.
Right, and sometimes there's a perfectly rational explanation, and sometimes there's not. But there's also shared experiences. So when 10 people have the same experience, are they all mentally ill in the same way?
Nope.
So, but yeah, it's definitely a materialist atheist sort of paradigm that he's clearly functioning in. And I'm sure as he starts off by saying, I've never had I've never had a supernatural experience, and I never will, because they don't exist.
Yeah. So I've never had sex, but if you ever get aroused, please see your counselor.
And the other thing I want to touch on is the what we did the Fringe News show on, which was this observatory. So the first thing I heard after we did the show, well, actually one of our listeners had pointed out that there's a military base right by it. And they said, I wonder if that had something to do with it. And then I heard that, yes, that's exactly what it was. It was someone at the military base, and they evacuated people just to be on the safe side. And I said, okay, well, that's reasonable if there's something going on there, that they're worried about. But today, and I think it was today, it came out that the entire place was shut down because of a janitor stealing the Wi-Fi to download child pornography. And I'm sorry, but that does not sit well with me. I feel like, why would you, like Ren had said, well, I could see them evacuating the facility so nothing else is touched and they can get as much evidence as possible. Okay, maybe, but they evacuated the town, the post office, for what? Exactly what was that helping?
I also saw a headline, well, not a headline, but something on Facebook that said that the janitor was warning about a serial killer or something like that. I didn't have time to read the article, but that's what I saw.
He was doing what?
He was warning about a serial killer or something. That's what the article said, or the headline of the article said. I don't know. So do you think that that's a cover story or something else?
I think either someone got it wrong or, it's a cover story.
Yeah.
Because I can't think of any, how many times have they taken pedophiles down? Or people downloading child porn. They don't shut down a town for a week or 2 weeks or whatever it was to catch someone downloading child pornography.
Yeah, that is a little strange.
Show me one other incident in our history where that has happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, unless it was, if it was it would be a breach of security, though, if it was being used in a government facility. That's the thing.
If you wanted to set up a topic that's so toxic that no one wants to touch it, that's definitely
yes,
the topic you'd employ.
Definitely.
I'll say that.
So, but yeah, I don't know if we're going to hear anything more about that, but it doesn't sit right with me. And I was willing to give him the benefit.
It is bizarre.
I was willing to totally give him the benefit of the doubt before, rather than jumping to a conspiracy theory. Now, I'm not saying that I'm jumping to a conspiracy theory now, but I just feel like the child pornography explanation just doesn't sit well. It doesn't explain the facts that we're looking at. You know, and if it was true that they were setting up things like antennas and stuff around the observatory, what does that have to do with tracking down someone who was downloading child porn? You know, maybe that was bad data. I don't know, but still, you don't shut a town down for 2 weeks due to someone downloading child porn.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that this corresponds with a lot of what, or at least according to Tim, and I tend to like him, so I tend to believe him. Seems to correspond with a lot of what Walter Bosley sort of found out behind the scenes beforehand. Now, of course, he's saying that he found all this after it comes out. So, you know, if you want to cast aspersions on Walter, you can. I met the guy. I tend to trust him more often than not. So,
Yes.
I'll say that sort of resonates with me as possibly lending some extra credence to it. But it feels a little odd. I'll give you that. Yeah, certainly.
So did I know Walter said it was around a person? I remember that part.
Right.
Did he confirm the child pornography thing?
I believe that came up, but he according to him, he was asked to not address it.
Oh, see, that seems weird too.
Yeah, I don't know. At the same time, I don't think it's about. I don't think it's about solar flares or invaders from Zebulganubi. Or
No. It's just that the explanation doesn't seem to fit the data, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not postulating explanations for it. I'm just saying that doesn't add up.
Right.
So, all right, let's get into Hunt for the Skinwalker. And this documentary, I believe, came out September 11th. And not only did I watch it, but I also listened to the interview that Greg Bishop did on Radio Mysterioso with George Knapp and Jeremy, what's his name? Corbell, yes.
Yep.
So, my opinion of it is I honestly didn't like it. It's not that it was badly done. It seemed aimed at people who didn't know this story, but at the same time that it wasn't. Like, it seemed like the first 15 or 20 minutes was George Knapp going, look at all this stuff I have. Look at all this data I have. Look at all this stuff I have, without them actually showing any of it. And I'm kind of like, all right, so if you didn't know anything about this, you're kind of lost at this point. But if you do, you're going, great, show it to me.
Well, he shows boxes and boxes of videos and documents and all kinds of stuff.
And from
sitting on the table.
From reading the book, and the book had a huge impact on me. It's actually one of the books that inspired some of the stuff in the movie I made, Gateways to Magonia. And I loved the book. The book, I mean, this Skinwalker Ranch is an incredible place. But from the book, I got the impression that they had all this like video evidence and other stuff that they just weren't sharing yet. So I'm sitting here with this documentary going, great, here's where they share this stuff. And then they didn't really, you get a couple of pictures you haven't seen before, but nothing really great. And you're also getting a lot of, there's not a whole lot new in there. You're getting a lot of the same stories from the book retold by people, in some cases twice. There was one part where George tells the story of the wood. Like, they moved the wood across the field and then it was back. And then they cut to someone who then also heard the story, not like a witness. And he goes, oh, yeah, they moved the wood and then it was back. And I'm thinking, so you just told us the same story twice with two different people who weren't involved. And it has very big, like, the style. I don't know. I think the style thing is just a personal thing. But I feel like I'm watching Preacher or Legion as opposed to a documentary, because he keeps presenting you with these giant letters on the screen. Like letters that just like these bombastic, huge, things. And I'm just like, why are you doing that? Please stop. you know. But that, to me, that's more a personal taste, I think, than anything else.
Yeah, that's a stylistic thing. That's not necessarily a content.
But the other thing I noticed, now Greg Bishop does a great show on Radio Mysterioso, and people might say, well, you know, do you want to have George Knapp or Jeremy on to talk about it? But here's the thing: from listening to that interview with Greg, who knows these guys, a lot of that interview was word for word from the documentary. Like it wasn't, huh?
Even beyond that point, I think that I actually. Okay, so here's my 2 cents. Is it an okay moment for me to jab in?
Yes,
here?
Yes.
I think as someone who read the book at an early age, it is invaluable to be able to put these locations in context. That was my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had a picture of the big events, the moving of the livestock into the trailer, the dire wolf, for lack of a better term, encounter. I had pictures of what that space looked like in my head, and it was nice to actually see what that space looked like.
Absolutely, I agree.
Beyond that, yeah, it seemed like a lot of the same information. I think it was Shirley who said in the Slack conversation that it might make sense to like bundle the book and the documentary together because they complement each other well.
Sure.
But yeah, the style didn't sit with me. Setting it in the context, I understand why they did it on a certain level, but at the same time, setting it in the context of the broader late 2017 quote unquote beginning of disclosure movement did not work for me.
Yeah.
Really to any degree. But the other thing that the other thing I can't remember. It was the reason. What were you saying before I interrupted you? Because it was exactly the reason that I interjected.
I don't know. It was word for word. In the Radio Mysterioso interview, like literally, I watched part of the documentary. I went somewhere, so I listened to the interview, and then I came back and continued watching the documentary. And I'm like, I've heard this before, and then I went, oh my God, this is literally word for word what he said on Radio Mysterioso.
Yeah. Well, beyond that, I actually think some parts of that Radio Mysterioso interview were even more interesting than what it ended up in the actual documentary. I mean, like I'm thinking specifically about. There was this one moment in Greg's interview on Radio Mysterioso where George Knapp, setting this aside, I admired George Knapp to the moon and back.
So do
he's
I.
My favorite Coast to Coast host. He's someone with real journalistic integrity and has a really balanced view on this stuff. So setting all that aside, something that George Knapp said that really I thought was really interesting was that they came to the conclusion as a sort of a group, as sort of an organization, that you could go everywhere as a mini Skinwalker ranch. That was in his interview with Greg. Is that like, any place you will find has this sort of stuff going on. Like literally your backyard. It's just the profundity and frequency and magnitude of these sort of interactions is more pronounced at Skinwalker Ranch. That was a more profound revelation to me than anything that I heard in the documentary, because it really does sort of re-enchant the world in a certain sense. So yeah, if anybody, not to be a little bit nepotistic here, but like to plug a friend, but I'm quite bullish on Greg's interview with them, and I'm not going to say don't go out and buy the documentary, because it's like I said, if you read the book, it really helps to contextualize some stuff. But if you have read the book and you're familiar with the material, it will not change your world in any way, shape, or form. No, and like I said, part of my issue was the style it was done in. Like, they have a clip of George Knapp talking early on, and they're talking about disclosure, and he's kind of being vague, and then the guy goes, or Jeremy says, is this going to involve Skinwalker Ranch? And he just kind of stares at the camera and then walks away, and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I'm pretty sure that was set to be dramatic. And there's a few moments in there like that where I'm thinking, are you just trying to make it seem more dramatic than it is? Like, what was the point of that? Yeah. I did not, because I was exhausted from staying up late on an interview last night and having a 7 a.m. gig today. I did not get to watch all the bonus content that I bought, but there is a great quote that George Knapp has in some of the bonus content where he says he's sitting around. It's in that situation where they're all sitting around the homesteads, which, in my mind, reading the book, were like actual homesteads, but they're basically haunted houses.
Yeah.
In the documentary, which is something that I'd never put together, which actually after seeing it, it's like, oh, that makes so much more sense.
Yep.
A lot of this stuff is centered around these homesteads, well, they're haunted houses. George Knapp actually says, sitting around the campfire, and this was something that was cut out of the documentary, he says, when we were here, science got its ass kicked, which is like, to me, that was the biggest quote that I could take away from this entire set of documentary evidence is I think that's a real summation of what the ranch represents in and of itself, because even though I think that the setting and the work done there is seminal, even if this sounds so counterintuitive, but I think the work that was done there is really groundbreaking, even if it doesn't appear groundbreaking in this documentary.
Yeah. And so Adam, your thoughts?
Well, I want to say one thing about what Josh was saying about it being put in the context of the disclosure movement and all this, or the latest disclosure movement kind of stuff that we're seeing now. So I think we got to remember that this is not, I don't think that this documentary, and I don't think any of the other appearances like Corbell has made on any other podcast, is kind of like preaching to the people that already know this information. I think this is all for people that don't know this and are going to be probably, maybe amazed by it. I just think we have to kind of remember that.
I don't know though, because the feel of it was more like you already know the story. Here's some additional details, but at the same time, it also felt like it was treating you like you were stupid and didn't know anything.
Yeah, I think that's why it's geared to those people that may have not read the book. I mean, when did the book come out? Was that 2005?
2003 or something like that.
Okay, so
I believe
I read it around 2005, 2006. So it's been several years since the book came out. And so there's probably not a lot of, and since people don't really read anymore, there's not a lot of people that really know about it now. As far as
2005, you're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
As far as like this, as far as the style, I mean, I was fine with it. It's that kind of new, kind of like hip, kind of filmmaking.
Oh yeah,
To kind of like draw you in and all this kind of like to make it more effective. If you watch Corbell's other documentary that's out there, I think it's like called Patient 17, that is about the guy that one of these guys that has an implant.
I fell asleep.
You fell asleep?
Yeah, I totally fell asleep.
It's the same kind of thing where he just like at one point he just unnecessarily drops the F-bomb and you're like, why does he do that? That's not necessary. And just some other things that are just real flashing in it. But this is just, I guess that's just him trying to be, different or something. But the information is good in both films. Yeah. I think what I had the main problem with, and I'll tell you, and this is a criticism of the book as well, I think, the one story that I have a hard time with, because maybe it's just too much, is the story about the portal opening up and something stepping through it, and you're seeing, and you can see the like another sky on the end of it, and all you have in this documentary is these guys telling you about it, and all you have in the book is people telling you about it. Okay, right. if there is footage of this, why isn't this being shown?
I
never
don't know
understood
that
there was
is.
footage ever, though. Yeah, I don't think there's footage.
Yeah,
But
so pretty much all you have is just these guys telling you that this happened.
Well,
And you could choose.
it said the guy with the paranormal podcast over here. I mean, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's just kind of how the that's just par for the course on any of this stuff.
Right.
We know that. But I have a hard. I don't know. I guess with that, I have a hard time with that because it seems very sensational, and sometimes this phenomenon isn't as sensational. Sometimes it's just more mundane.
well, you know
And some
what?
of the other stuff I have a lot easier time believing. Maybe the dire wolf is a little hard to believe too. But I don't see why they would have what the reason would be for them to lie about it though. But it's just maybe it just strains my own credulity. I don't know.
Sure. Well, here's the other thing. Even in the documentary, you don't hear from the people who had that experience. You hear from two other people who heard the story.
Right. Yeah. So you're getting it what second or third hand already.
Yeah.
And they're telling you about what happened. And then at the end of the okay, well, spoiler alert. I guess all this is spoiler alert. But the part that frustrated me the most was at the end of the documentary. Towards the end, you have the new owner, and of course they have blacked out his face, or actually he only films him from the neck down.
Right.
And then of course you got the mysterious voice,
Uh-huh.
And so he's talking and he says, "This is just the most amazing thing. What we're discovering here is going to change everything." And I'm just thinking, why aren't you sharing this?
Yeah.
Why aren't you sharing it with the world if it is so important?
Robbie Williams.
Why are
Robbie
you not
Williams.
sharing?
There's a theory out there that Robbie Williams is the new owner, and I'm not.
Is the new owner?
And that someone else was standing in to sort of talk about it while Robbie was on set, and I don't disbelieve that idea.
Yeah, but even if that person is an actor, that still probably is the mindset that they have. Like they say that this is the most amazing thing ever. This is going to change the way we view the world, the way we view science, the way we view humanity. But we're not going to share it with anybody. That's their attitude that they have. And I don't know, just something about that attitude just really irks me.
So talk about who Robbie Williams is, because I heard them talk about him on Radio Mysterioso, and I have no idea who he is.
I'm actually like, I always take pride when I'm teaching kids like music, and they're like, it's like that song by Imagine Dragons, and I'm like, Imagine who? So I'm not the pop culture guy either. So Adam, save us here, save our bacon here.
As far as I know, I think he's like a British pop singer. As far as I can tell, the name sounded familiar to me.
Stop screaming at us, podcast listeners.
The name sounded familiar to me as well as his face, but I couldn't tell you a single thing the guy has done. But there is the book of knowledge to look at too, guys. So
Angels Feel, She's the One, Rock DJ, Let Me Entertain You, Party Like a Russian. I guess these are all songs of his. I don't know. It's
okay.
He was a member of the pop group Take That from 1990 to 1995, and again from 2009 to 2012.
I read Wikipedia too, Adam. It's welcome to the old 14.
but I do remember Take That. I can tell you. I can tell
I
you
don't.
that. I never listened to them, but I remember them. So.
Yeah, none of that is familiar to me.
I knew the name, so...
Yeah, because they kind of defended having him come out to the ranch on the Radio Mysterioso interview.
Uh-huh.
So, but I was kind of like, I don't know who that is. And I assumed it must have been a pop star or something,
it just seems quite conspicuous for him to have no connection to just sort of pop up all of a sudden. That's my 2 cents. But I will say my personal biggest takeaway, the most profound thing for me in the documentary, well, there was another sort of broader observation, but in terms of like evidential footage, I will say this: if the calf mutilation presented towards the very end is presented truthfully and honestly and accurately, and if you say that nothing odd, didn't say extraterrestrial, didn't say non-human, didn't say unnatural, I'm just saying odd, anomalous, is going on, then we have nothing in common. Like, I have nothing to say. Because to look at that, like, you can read about that particular cattle mutilation in the book, and it has an impact, but to actually see the bloodlessness and how cleanly it was laid bare, and the fact there's nothing around there, that to me was, that was worth the price of admission for me. That was the most profound thing that I left with. I don't know how y'all felt about it.
That was definitely.
I didn't.
Go ahead.
Well, I'd say I didn't have a problem with it. I mean, we know that this happens, and it's happened in more than just that place. So it wasn't something that I necessarily had a problem with. But that's. Go ahead.
I'm not saying problem. I'm not saying problem. I'm just saying that, like, it made an impact on me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it made an impact on me in the sense that it was. I mean, we've all seen cattle mutes and pictures and such, but it seemed to be a very exemplary case of those things that you hear about: the precision, the lack of blood, and like I said, if all the facts were presented as they were, then it's an impressive case to have video evidence of. That's my 2 cents.
I agree.
Yeah.
What I wish, and they, like little things, you always hear the story about the cattle being stuffed into the bulls being stuffed into that container, which now you get a look at, and it's not exactly what I pictured. But still, yes, it's an odd thing. But like, why did nobody take a picture while the bulls were in the container? Like they're going, well, these bars were magnetized, and yeah, that's really interesting. It's all in the book, and again, it gives you that context if you're getting to see the place. But damn it, I wish there was a picture of those bulls stuffed in there so we could really see what these people found.
Right. But I mean, it's the biggest criticism, leveled against all this stuff is that it's mostly hearsay. I mean, the skeptical pushback in response to this documentary prompted me to sort of author one of the lengthiest blog posts that I've authored. If you get angry on the internet, just blog. But putting that aside, I think what the community, our community, for lack of a better term, needs to realize is that it's nothing about this is scientific, and nothing about it will hold up under scientific scrutiny.
No.
And you need to be okay with that. You need to sit with that, and you need to the fact that it doesn't mean that things aren't real. It just means that the understanding of the way that these things present themselves evidentially takes time to gain popularity in the certain paradigm that we operate under. That's my biggest takeaway. I mean, like honestly, I've gotten more enjoyment out of the discussion around the documentary than I have the actual documentary itself.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I had written down a couple other things that stuck out to me here. I also think it goes very slowly. I don't know. Like, it just seemed to take forever to get to anything really all that interesting. But again, that might be more of a personal, like, I just want to get to the data type of thing. So you talked about the cattle mutilation there, and they showed, I think it was the dogs, from what I could tell, that were also mutilated. And they talked about how animals kept getting mutilated. It's interesting to me that whatever this phenomena is will hurt animals, but it doesn't hurt people. And I'm sure that there are cases out there of supposed human mutilations. But let's look at just the Skinwalker Ranch. These mutilations only happen to the animals. The animals are killed. Yeah, all this stuff happens to the animals, but nothing to people. So to me, that implies that this intelligence differentiates between us and animals.
And there's an uncomfortable implication there for people who are vegans and vegetarians based on moral standards. I mean, I'm not trying to alienate anyone, but like it implies some sort of degree of hierarchy in terms of prioritizing sentience, I think.
Yeah, at least from their viewpoint, whatever these things are.
Yeah.
And how much of that is drawn from us,
Yeah, 100%.
So, but I just found that really striking because, like, if to them we're just animals, then why are we not being treated the same as the animals? To whatever these things are.
Yeah.
Beyond that, let's see. Oh, okay. So yeah. So let's get into one of the implications of that then, because a number of times, either that or he said it both in the Radio Mysterioso interview and the documentary. I know I've heard George Knapp now say it a bunch of times that this was like a Rorschach test, that people would come here and everyone would see different stuff, and it was kind of like a paranormal Rorschach test. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And what it makes me feel is that this stuff is depending upon us for what it is. Like, not that there's not another intelligence involved, but that intelligence relies on our interpretation of it. And if that's the case, that might also be why animals will get mutilated, but not people. Because in our interpretation of this stuff, that's, people are different than animals. Especially people who are doing, farmers and stuff don't see, they may care a great deal about their animals, but they don't equate them with the same level they care about, their family members.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And I sort of alluded to earlier the idea that it's interesting that these homesteads look like haunted houses, but at the same time, when I saw them, I'm like, of course they look like haunted houses, and like it's all sort of archetypally resonant in that sense. Which sort of makes me wonder if it's less about like there being a specific, the geographical anomaly, and more that like we have to do some stage setting both mentally and physically in terms of the structures that we put on a certain place to attract a lot of this phenomena.
Fair enough. I think it's a little bit of everything. I think that's also part of the failing in a lot of research is that we look at it as one thing or another. Oh, this is a haunted house. Well, but that haunted house needs someone to interact with. And the idea that consciousness is a part of this gets thrown around really easily, but I don't know that people really take that all the way through to the implications of it, that we may be giving these things its form. So yeah, it's a Rorschach test in the sense that it takes the form from us. It may still be something alien and intelligent, but because of the way our perception works, we're seeing something because we need to see it that way. Or we have no context for it, so we're only going to see it a certain way.
Right. Yeah, I 100%.
So, and what else did I put down? And that goes also for they're talking about how the phenomena is precognitive. And they use the bulls as an example there. And they say, well, the family was worried about the bulls and then the bulls disappeared. And I'm like, but is that really precognitive? Or did the phenomena respond to the fact that they were worried about the bulls?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of, it's obviously the big thing. The big question that's raised by stuff like the Philip experiment, like, if there can be some sort of, collective psi manifestation of people's beliefs, then, perhaps, maybe it was something that put the bulls in the cage, or maybe their anxiety put the bulls in the cage,
Right.
Well, something that I was wondering, the next day after I watched it, was what I was kind of thinking to myself is, in these strange places where all this weird stuff goes on, would anything actually happen if people were not around?
Right. Yeah, does it need us to manifest?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the tree in the forest doesn't make a sound. That old thing.
And
if no one is there to observe it, does anything happen?
And it might be there regardless, but it might not have the form it might take from our observing it.
Yeah.
And they were talking about, and I've said this before, the way you approach this stuff seems to be how it responds to you. And they're talking about people getting hitchhikers, where these things follow them home, and they continue to have weird experiences. And George, at least on Radio Mysterioso, said that the people that got the hitchhikers were generally the ones trying to confront it, trying to, kind of get in its face, or they were the macho military types and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, right, they're people approaching it with hostility, and it's responding with hostility. And that, it's, to me, that says a lot about what this thing is, that it has some mirrored aspects. It has some aspects it takes from us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it almost has to, in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, what you're dealing with basically is just, I mean, it's responding to human emotions. So if that's not there, what is it responding to?
Mm-hmm.
Or what would it respond to?
Well, I mean, so counter is these anomalous events that are often captured on CCTV in abandoned buildings, which you see pop up all over the internet all the time. Counter number one, hoaxes. Counter number two, chance. Counter number three, if there is something behind the phenomena, it knows that you're going to watch that CCTV footage at some point, But it reminds me of that tired argument that you always find about skeptics. It's like, well, why does Neil deGrasse Tyson voice? Why does every ghost hunt have to happen at night in the abandoned house? Well, did you ever consider that something about the set and setting, not unlike the psychedelic experience, that's something about the set and setting might actually help these things manifest. Well, no, because we assume that everything has to happen in this sterile laboratory setting,
right?
Which is just not the way that's not the way life or the world works. It's just fundamentally not. Mm-hmm.
And again, if this stuff is taking part of its reality from our experiencing it, then set and setting is very important.
Yeah. 100%.
And of course, the number of commonalities between some of this stuff and psychedelic experience can't be ignored either. Especially when dealing with UFOs.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Why didn't they just go out to Skinwalker Ranch and drop some acid or take some mushrooms or something? I mean, that would be a really good experience.
Well, as someone who's watched this discussion unfold at the Paracast forums, that's unscientific, Adam. We don't want to bring substances into this already marginalized, ridiculous experience that everybody thinks is crazy in the first place. Heaven forbid we actually make some progress by bringing in some sort of substance.
Hey man, they're giving MDMA to octopuses. Okay, so I mean,
really. I did not hear about that.
Yeah, that just came out the other day. It made them more, what was it, Adam, more empathetic towards other octopi?
Really?
I guess, man, yeah.
I believe that's what it was, that they saw more socialization among octopi after dosing them with MDMA, yeah.
Which doesn't that happen with humans too?
Yeah, it's not surprising at all. Oh, this advanced consciousness acts the same way that this other advanced consciousness.
Did they turn on the EDM music when they onto the octopuses when they were down there in the? Anyway,
what you need to do is you need to dose a human with MDMA, and an octopus with MDMA, and see what happens then. That's what I want to see. Interspecies MDMA love. That's what I want to see happen.
You might have summoned Cthulhu on that one there, Josh. I don't know.
Yeah.
And now we know what Josh is into.
Right. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Birth of a Fetish. Here we go.
So, when it comes up to the new owner on this documentary, whoever it might be, it so much felt like the same typical BS you get from all this stuff, because everything's being hidden, It like you said, they're talking about all this stuff that they got and how incredible it is, but they're not going to tell us what any of it is. And it's kind of like, yeah, this is what we've been hearing from a million people over the last 50, 60, 70 years. It's like, oh, yeah, we'll wait till you see, except we never see. The stuff never actually materializes. And it's kind of like they took this to be like, okay, so here's the stuff we found at Skinwalker Ranch. Okay, there's not really much here. But now the new owner, wait till you see what he got, but he's not going to show you right now,
Yeah.
You're going to wait another 20 years to see what he has to show you.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of the talk about some other hotspots. Like, I don't know if either of you are familiar with Marley Woods at all.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, Marley Woods was a similar area. I believe it's been revealed to be in Missouri now, but it was not privately owned, I don't believe, but or not, privately owned in the sense that as restricted as the Sherman/Gorman Ranch is, which I find it incredibly hilarious that they just interchange Sherman and Gorman without really any real note of that.
They gave you the real name of the people. If you watched it pretty closely, you saw what their real name was. Yeah.
Yeah, they interchanged at one point. Someone, I can't remember who it was, but someone said, Gorman, and then said, "Well, I won't use it." The Gorman was the name that I was given, and then later they slip up and say Sherman, and it's like, well, come on, let's not play games here.
I think that was George Knapp, and I think he said the real name is out there, but he was using the name he was given.
I am 90% sure that on the Radio Mysterioso interview they said Knapp said that he wouldn't use Sherman, which is the real name, that he would use Gorman or vice versa. But I remember a similar statement being made in the documentary, and then just literally a minute and a half later, the other name being given. So anyway,
yeah, that could be.
That's neither here nor there. But the Marley Woods were not owned in the sense that the ranch is owned, but it was studied in depth by some really, open, parapsychological people, some ufologists and such, who made several media appearances talking about how they were really looking forward to sharing this information, and it doesn't get shared. And, it's so easy to lapse back into skeptical thinking and think that, it doesn't get shared because it's all bunk or because et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, at the same time, I think that might be baked into the phenomena. The fact that,
I think somebody just wants to control that information,
right?
And then that just gives you to the next question: why do they want to control that information? What is it that do they want to control it because it's just a proprietary thing, and they want to just make sure that they're going to get recognized for this great thing that they have done? Do they think they're going to harness this energy somehow? I mean, why? What is the purpose? I mean, I guess where my frustration is if you really want to share this with mankind, then share it with mankind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for God's sakes, you got enough money. Share it with mankind. It just I don't know. It's just this. We've got this whole new, just these new entrepreneurs out there that that's what they want to do. They just want to control any kind of information, really.
Well,
I mean, look, I'm glad that NIDS was out there, that they were doing what they were doing, but Bigelow wasn't letting them share anything.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and this is where I say, I mean, none of this is ever meant to be shared. I mean, it's not. The longer I go in this, the more I think that that's not part of what the experience is supposed to be. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to be personal. Rather. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to be subject to ridicule if you share it. Because it's almost like this personal. I mean, this is sort of a track that I've been on for a while. It's supposed to be this personal alchemy. It's supposed to be you experiencing things, you changing your worldview, and if you talk to other people about it, it's going to sound crazy. And that's the reason that we don't win hearts and minds of skeptics. That's the reason that you have people who go down the true believer path so stridently, is because it's so personal. And I think that might be actually just part and parcel for what we experience. So in that case, I mean, people who acquire this stuff, even with the best intentions, might wish to share it with the world, but something about it keeps that from happening. Now, I realize there are a lot of people probably listening that says it sounds more like faith, and I don't disagree with you. And again, I think that might be the freaking point. He said, his voice breaking, the freaking point, you guys.
It is personal. And you're 100% right on that, Josh. But what I'm just thinking back to what the new owner, whoever he is, said, that this is going to change everything. And just like what I just said, obviously he thinks that this is going to, not just for him, but the whole world, it's going to change. But why is he keeping it from everybody, even still?
And
that's the part that is just like that's A, frustrating, and B, baffling.
Yeah, I can't. At the same time, that was me playing devil's advocate. Like, if you have stuff, put up or shut up. Sorry, go ahead, Seriah.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, and that's that thing that you hear over and over. This is going to change the world. This is going to be the biggest thing ever. This is, when people see this, nothing's ever going to be the same. It's the same statements, and again, the same statements made from anonymity. How many times have we seen that? And I was really disappointed to see that that's where they were going with this at the end. Is this once again this anonymous, distorted voice saying that the whole world's going to change when this information comes out, but we're not going to give it to you right now.
This is what I've come to term the Ray Stanford phenomena, which is, if anybody's familiar with the work of Ray Stanford, brilliant paleontologist. He's actually discovered one of the world's largest dinosaur tracks. So he's got some real credentials, and for years, people that I really respect, a lot of people I really respect, have been privately invited to see some of Ray Stanford's evidence regarding UFOs, because that's a sort of subject area of interest for him. People come back and they talk about seeing very specific videos that are unambiguously pilots in craft doing strange anomalous things, all sorts of really remarkable stuff. And it's always coming. The evidence is always coming. And put up or shut up after some point. It's been I think at least a decade since these claims have been made, and they keep on being recycled. Now look, Ray, if you're listening, make me look like a complete hack by saying this.
Is this the guy that has you can go to his house and he's got it takes you a day to watch the footage? Is that what you're talking about?
And look, and to his credit, this guy's not a crank. I mean, he like I said, a lot of his paleontological finds are really startling and are sort of enshrined in museums. I mean, they're really remarkable. But at the same time, he supposedly has this amazing ufological evidence that he shares with a select few, and it's, why not release it? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So.
And of course, this is all getting wrapped up into the whole To the Stars thing as well, where it's kind of like dovetailed into that. Even though it's not technically a part of it, the documentary starts off with it, with the whole New York Times thing, making a huge deal out of it, even though it turned out not to be so much of a big deal. And in the interview on radio, Yeah.
I'm sorry. I heard to the stars and I started yawning. I'm sorry.
And even in the interview there, they're talking up the to the stars thing. They're like, well, we're not directly involved with it, and I'm thinking, yeah, but you're part of the same scene, that same thing that's going on, that it's like a lot of hoopla with not a lot of like follow through.
Yeah.
Here's the documentary you've been waiting for. It's like, here's the documentary you've been waiting for, and I'm sitting through it going, I'm kind of bored.
Well, and it's like Stockholm syndrome. The Rush just say that it says something unique. There's like the Stockholm, like we've been led up to believe that says something profound, and we've got to find whatever that thing is, and it just sort of dissipates like a fart in a party.
Well, the thing is, the book is fantastic. The information in that book. The research they did at that ranch is awesome. It's really, if everything in there, if even a half of what's in there is completely true, the data is incredible. But again, the book kind of led me to believe there was a lot of like video and stuff that they weren't showing us. And so here's me going, "Oh cool, now we get to see all that video," and there's no video. They showed you the calf.
Mm-hmm.
The calf was, was definitely interesting. They showed you pictures of some of the other mutilations, so that was interesting. They showed
there was a handful of anomalous like light sky phenomena.
Yep. There were a few photographs. One they called like the Twin Towers, where the camera got this like these almost like hologram like images of what seemed like buildings. But even with those, though, they're like giving you a very small version of the picture. And I'm thinking, why are you not giving us a bigger picture, zooming in, et cetera, and really like analyzing in on this? You're kind of seeing it as a smaller box in the middle of the screen. It's like, oh, here are some of the fascinating things it captured. And I'm like, why are we not seeing close-ups of this stuff?
Yeah,
the new owner at the end, same thing. There, he's like showing him pictures of UFOs they've taken on the property, and you're seeing the pictures on his lap as physical printouts rather than like good close zoom-ins of these pictures. And the question is, why? Was it a taste? Was it like a taste thing? Like I think it would look better if we just, it's more mysterious if we don't close in on it. Or was the guy like, don't get too close, these are really fake?
Yeah,
the other impression I got
nothing.
The other impression I came away with from the book is that this stuff was that George Knapp was personally involved in this stuff. And, he comes onto the documentary and he's like, nothing ever happened to me. And I'm thinking, oh, I was kind of under the impression you were there for a lot of this stuff. But I guess he was just collecting the stories, and that kind of changes the feel of it to me a little bit. Like, I don't think it's any less genuine, but I felt like this was stuff that George experienced. I have faith in George. I trust George to be an honest reporter. Hence, I believe this stuff happened. But then you find out, oh, no, George really wasn't involved in any of this stuff. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, that changes my perspective a little bit.
Well, he was just doing what a reporter does and just reporting on it.
Right, but
essentially.
I guess the impression I took from the book is that he was there while this stuff was going on.
Sure.
Like that he was sort of embedded with them.
Yeah, well, I think he was probably back and forth, but not there the entire time. He does say at one point he did sit out there and they used him as bait, but all he got was mosquitoes.
Yep.
He does say that at one point.
That is one of the things he repeats word for word on Radio Mysterioso.
Right.
So.
Yeah,
right.
And I have a sense, and this is sort of I realize how silly this is. This is sort of the empty promissory note of anomalistics, but I feel like there is a lot of stuff that is not getting said. I feel like there's a lot of stuff that George experienced that, I mean, because he's kept his mouth shut on some remarkable stuff in the past, couple decades. And I get the sense that there's some stuff that he's still holding back when you watch that documentary. That's my feeling.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah, and that goes back to my point about Bigelow and now the new owner. He's just like, what are they holding back? What is so mind blowing that they're holding back?
Right.
I mean, are they? Well, I don't know. Maybe I guess there was a portal that opened up. Maybe we're sending people through it. I don't know, man. And these guys just put my conspiracy hat on. Maybe these guys are actually controlling this, and they just don't want people to know.
I don't feel like you can take any of this stuff at face value. Okay, so let's accept the story about them seeing this portal open up and something crawling through. Now, when they talk about it on the documentary, you find out that of the two people that were stationed on that ridge, so they both saw this like yellow light. And one guy threw on the night vision goggles, and with the night vision goggles, he saw this thing kind of come through the wormhole, crawl out, and walk away. And for some reason in the book, if I'm not remembering wrong, it actually spoke into his head as well. But only one of them saw that. So there weren't two witnesses to this thing coming through a portal. There was one. And maybe that's just like it. I guess what I'm saying is that maybe it wasn't what it seemed like. Maybe whatever was interacting with him put on this performance of this is what you're seeing. Again, with that Rorschach test sort of thing, I think, you go things. How can I put this? You go out into the woods, and we've talked about the whole idea of a wilderness poltergeist. But I think after a while, if there's some random energy there and everyone starts seeing the same thing, it strengthens that random energy's form. So maybe that's what creates certain areas where you get a lot of Bigfoot sightings or something. If it's not a physical creature, maybe it's an energy. It's that random piece of consciousness that's been meandering about in this area. Someone sees it, thinks it's a gorilla. Later on, the gorilla becomes a Bigfoot, and enough people keep seeing it and seeing a Bigfoot because that's what their brain has been programmed to see in the woods, that it becomes a Bigfoot.
Right. It sits at the center of the Venn diagram between poltergeist and tulpa. I mean, we already know that. Well, I say know that that's a little bit sort of assumptive, but we already suspect, given sci research, that poltergeists are centered around a person, and tulpas are centered around a person. So why wouldn't that be a possibility as well?
And the thing is, not all poltergeists are centered around people.
Right.
Occasionally, they're centered around areas. And I would say the Seattle Devil House is a good example. Keith Linder there has been on the show, and actually he just put out a documentary. I haven't seen it yet. He's contacted me, but I haven't gotten back to him. But from the sounds of it, that was a location thing. There were no typical poltergeist triggers where he was. I mean, there were no children in the house. It was him and I believe his girlfriend, and this house just had thing after thing happen. And with Steve Mera there, pulled up all kinds of really compelling evidence that something weird was going on. And even though when Keith left, he had some stuff happen, it wasn't to the level of what was happening in that house. So it is possible to have poltergeist activity that doesn't fit the normal poltergeist scheme, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So then you have to ask, is it energy in that area that interacted with Keith? Is it an actual entity? Why did stuff happen after he left? It didn't happen before he lived there. So did something follow him, or did it affect him in such a way that he then affected his environment wherever he went?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wonder if we're not seeing sort of a bleed through of I mean, I think that we're more tied to land and geography than we realize, and I think that if we embrace concepts of time being non-local, then maybe perhaps space in some sense is non-local, and if you have genus loci, spirits of the land, you have spirits of the self, and it's really undifferentiated between which is which.
And also don't forget that the sun seems to have an effect on psychic ability. As Robert Schoch showed, analyzing a century's worth of psychic tests that are done in the laboratory, these people perform better when solar cycles are high than when solar activity is low. And for that to be the case, as he said, it's pretty much proof by itself of the legitimacy of this stuff, because the other solution would be there was a worldwide conspiracy going back 100 years to only provide good fake results when solar activity was high.
Mm-hmm.
Which would just is beyond so ridiculous that it's not even a considerable theory. So like when they said that the activity, dipped off at Skinwalker Ranch, what was the sun doing while it was active? What was the sun doing while it wasn't active?
Well, I mean, there are so many in trying to shove all this into the materialist paradigm. There's so many shortcomings in the documentary and in sort of the research method. I mean, like, what was going on with the ranch owners? What was their personal experience? What was their life experience? Was there strife in the household? Was there interpersonal strife? Was there some sort of other things going on like that? Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot more research, both folklorically and practically, could have gone into this idea that if you dig in the ground, the phenomena increases in activity. I mean, that seems like a huge data point that both in the book and in the in the documentary, I wouldn't say gets glossed over, but like that's something that you pursue to the hilt. I mean, the implications of that, from like a Gaian hypothesis, from like a fairy faith hypothesis, from all sorts of different ideas. That's something that you really should be looking into so much, and I feel like none of that really got the sort of attention that it really deserved.
You have similar events happen when people start renovating an old house. Right. Paranormal activity usually kicks up.
Right, the liminal state.
Right.
But why specifically digging into the ground? And like they said, they kept hearing noises like machinery running under the ground. That was something that really stuck with me, because I'm thinking, that's just downright creepy.
Yeah, that's weird.
You walk outside and you hear machinery running under the ground. It's like, what?
Our very own near and dear to our hearts, Tim Renner, during his sort of chess with the other experience, which he's talked about on the show a lot. One of his last experiences was marked by an eerie feeling, and what he felt like sounded like gears shifting and grinding in the wilderness, and he didn't have any sense of where that sound was coming from. Which
I don't remember that.
I think he mentioned it once or twice in passing. It'll be coming up a little bit more later, but it reminds me of the fact that as sympathetic and as much of a supporter of sort of fairy faith hypotheses and whatnot, as you'll hear, it really reminds me of some scholars who really do cite, one of the central tenets that gets glossed over in a lot of Jacques Vallée's work, which is the fact that there is a technological aspect to this. I don't like to admit that myself, but there's some technological aspect to this sort of thing.
Yeah, it's just a matter of that's one of the monkey wrenches that gets thrown into it, because without that, you could argue as more of a psychological thing. You could argue more of a something that involves just consciousness, just the mind. But then you have these physical traces, this technological element, and you go, well, that can't be all just in the mind if that's the case.
Right. Yeah, it's
the
true.
fairies have developed steampunk technology. gears and whistles and stuff.
No, I just think everything's a lot weirder than we think it is, and I think none of us have any freaking clue what's going on. Any freaking clue what's going on.
And I'm going to go back to the beginning of when I started doing this show. One of the things I said and said over and over again is that we do not understand what reality is. We think we do, but we have no idea, and we have no idea of the limitations or how we interact with it or what we are. And we're not going to solve this with the current models of reality that we have, because it simply doesn't fit, because our models are wrong.
You know, I was thinking about that in the car today. Well, cigarettes cause cancer. Well, why? Because certain chemicals interact in these certain ways and they metastasize. Well, why? Because, and you can only drill down so deep into that sort of why question before you're really asking why any of these things interact the way that they do. There's a substrata to a lot of this reductionist thinking that just is really untenable in terms of how it can explain the fact that you can ask these questions in the first place.
Yeah. And I guess, like, part of the reason I didn't like the documentary is I expected more of it. Maybe not, like, I'm not saying it was bad. I'm not saying people shouldn't watch it. If you're, and like Josh said, it's great because it does show you these locations and stuff. I was just really hoping for more bang out of it, I guess.
And if someone is new to the story, I think that they will really enjoy it.
Yeah.
If you have not read the book, there were certain things that I did enjoy. I'll be honest, the parts that were done by George Knapp, I think I really enjoyed and were much more informative in many ways.
And so, like, they get to a point where they start interviewing a few of the people who live around there and just getting their UFO stories, and I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting, but again, it's not anything new. I mean, the stories weren't like, oh my god, I've never heard a UFO story like that before. It was kind of like, okay, yep, there's UFO activity. We've heard these stories before.
Yeah.
It was kind of almost, and at least one of them felt like it just went on forever, and I was like, okay, can we go to something else? Like, I got the idea here. Maybe I'm just impatient at this point.
Well, I think part of it is just that we know this.
Yeah, and that is,
and like I said before, this is for people that don't know this. This is for someone that may be coming at this at the first time, that sees this thing whenever it'll probably hit Netflix at some point or Amazon Prime.
I would think
somebody's gonna see this and say, "Oh, let's watch this."
And
they're going to watch it and just they're going to either be completely amazed or they're just going to laugh at it. I mean, that's really the two choices that people would have, is to either be amazed by it or scoff. But, this is for people that, this is for this is for a wider consumption. Let's just put it that way.
Fair enough. It's available.
Which is what I made.
Well, and here's my take on that. Not to belittle your point, Adam, which I think is really important, but I mean, so we're reaching out to that like 15% of weirdos that haven't familiarized themselves with this point. I mean, like, what? This is not the Christian missionary experience to Africa. Like, this is not the bridge. This is not the hill that you die on for anomalistics, right? I mean, this is not the great outreach of.
Yeah, but I think that there is a move to try to popularize this.
Yes.
This stuff to make it more.
That's the To the Stars thing.
Exactly. The To the Stars thing. Yeah. There's all these YouTube channels right now of people that do these like lists, and they do these things about true crime, or they do these things about. Are about paranormal stuff, and it's all like, for everybody that has short attention spans, and this is, I mean, this stuff is a very popular thing now, and it's not necessarily for people that are really interested, because I'll have people, when I tell them I do the podcast, or that they'll come up with something that is you know, just kind of basic stuff. I mean, it's not. When I try to explain it, they're like, "Oh, would you believe in the Illuminati or the Anunnaki?"
Right, right.
You know, this documentary is for that group of people that are going to watch it. They want eyeballs to watch it, and they're either going to come out of it with a different viewpoint, or they're just going to come out and say, "Oh, that was cool." That is cool, people. That's how I see it. And the To the Stars Academy, like Seriah said, is the same way. That's why they got somebody like Tom DeLonge. He can appeal to the kids, quote unquote.
Here is where I give the documentary props. At no point do they say they have an explanation for this. At no point do they say things like, well, this was aliens, or anything like that. They actually come across as being very agnostic about it. We don't know what this is, but there's an intelligence there. Okay, that's a fair enough statement.
Right.
And that's really what they give you, and I very much appreciated that. They didn't try to pigeonhole this into one thing or another.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is the new meme now, because the alien stuff doesn't work anymore. Our viewpoint on this, guys, has become more and more popular.
Which is fine.
We're the UFO hipsters. We were doing it before anyone popular. Yeah.
But you know what? If an agnostic attitude is cool, that's fine, because that's where you get the most data. It's when you start making assumptions and close off to other ideas that you miss connections. You miss those interconnections.
Yeah.
Again, looking at the wilderness Bigfoot idea or wilderness poltergeist ideas, if you don't study poltergeist stuff and you don't study cryptid stuff, you're not going to make the connection that this activity in the woods is very similar to poltergeist activity. It doesn't explain anything, but the fact that there's a connection, Josh nicknamed it a wilderness poltergeist because that's exactly what it seems like. You're not seeing a cryptid, you're just getting this poltergeist activity. And that may tell us more about what this phenomena ultimately is than pigeonholing it into one thing or another. I mean, because that poltergeist activity is also mimicking primate activity. So it's hard to differentiate between one or the other.
Right. Yeah, it was interesting. I actually heard in a conversation that I had last night on a podcast about a researcher who was allegedly, I would love to get the name of this, I would love to get this guy's phone number, but was allegedly introduced to a gentleman who claimed to be able to conjure fairy folk, and went out to his backyard and somewhere in the Midwest and shined a light, and there were all these sort of firefly-like lights, and when the flash went off, the sort of elven figure was seen. And when this particular researcher went home, they actually experienced slapping on the walls outside their house, something running alongside the roof, tapping on the window. And that's when I said, well, obviously it's Bigfoot, because those are the things a lot of Bigfooters want to point to as being evidence of Bigfoot activity. And it's just not, there are so many overlaps. And I feel like, as much as I was sort of ribbing at him for, joking about people who do or don't want to hear this stuff, the times in which we live have gotten much more receptive to this in general, even outside the esoteric community. The level of dialogue that I see about this is opening up to a degree that the people who are pushing back really, really, really are sounding like fuddy-duddies. I mean, it's almost hilarious how untenable the materialist position has gotten in the face of a lot of this change. And I think that some of this change is linked to some of the crises in science that we see, like the replicability crisis, which is something that's sort of gone sort of a quiet, dirty little secret in a lot of scientific communities, but also tied in with greater themes, like Gordon White would point out in terms of the collapse of empire and sort of the lack of faith in sort of the models in which we live. But it's really, to me, it's like a breath of absolute fresh air, the fact that you can actually sit beside someone on an airplane and talk about UFOs. Like, I'm amazed. Like, I'm sitting here in I'm going to a church group once a week, a small church study group, and there's one couple that's totally into Bigfoot and one couple that's totally into UFOs. Now, their ideas are simplistic, but the fact that you can bring that up in a church setting is really weird in a really great way. So it's getting better, and if a rising tide lifts all ships. So if this particular documentary actually gains some traction in that sense, then more power to Jeremy and George.
Sure.
And again, nothing about the quality of the product seems amateurish. I mean, it's very well put together in that sense. Quibbles about content and style aside, it's very well put together, and kudos for fighting the good fight.
Yeah, and like I said, my issues with the way it was done were more a taste thing. Like I would like it to be a little more reserved, a little less bombastic. Like I said, I felt like I was watching Legion or watching Preacher, and it's fine in those. They're graphic novels, adapted to television. So when you get the giant letterings filling up the screen, it's kind of like, yeah, okay, that's fine. That's not a big deal. But when it's a documentary, it's like, shouldn't this be a little more reserved? I don't know. Maybe that's just what I'm used to. There was something else you just said, though, that I wanted to comment on, and now I've completely forgotten about something about the fairy thing. Oh, I was going to say, so according to the guy who wrote the John Dies at the End novel, everyone at this ranch is mentally ill.
The Skinwalker Ranch or a ranch,
right.
A fictional ranch in the novel?
No. At the Skinwalker Ranch. By his definition of there not being material like this, all these scientists and everyone else are just mentally ill.
I mean, Seriah, get out the bleep button, Okay, so it does say something that the two quote unquote protagonists of our time on the ranch in this documentary haven't experienced anything. I think that's a not insignificant factor. I think that there's some sort of germ of importance in there in that particular data point. But I mean, it's just
that. But I think, I think that there's just some people who don't have these experiences, who are not prone to them. They don't have that sense array.
Well, it's always like, I remember, I'll never forget, I was speaking with my first conversation with a group at MUFON about, a Trojan Feast, talking about anomalous food and drink offerings and, these encounters. And there was an experiencer there, and all due respect to her, she raises her hand and she says, well, I've experienced a lot of this stuff, and I've never had this happen to me. And I said, well, I've been driving a car for 15, 20 years now, and I've never had a blowout. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen, So it's this idea that my personal experience would mirror that is just it's an untenable argument, I think. Of course, since then I have had a blowout, so I guess that argument's a little bit diminished, but you get the idea.
And this documentary is available on Vimeo. And what was the other location that they were putting it out on? Does anyone remember?
iTunes.
Yeah.
iTunes? Okay. All right. So yeah, I mean, maybe it'll make its way to Netflix and stuff. I'm actually a big fan of Vimeo, but it's just never caught on. But it's a beautiful website.
So get iTunes. You can get it on iTunes if you want to slow your system down to a crawl. You can use iTunes.
Yeah, I did the Vimeo thing on Amazon Fire Stick, and it worked like a charm.
Yeah.
I'm not enamored with the app, but if it means not nowadays, if it means not using iTunes and not using YouTube, kind of into it.
Oh, I will say, as a follow-up to something I've mentioned a few times, the monetization issue with YouTube has fixed itself. I had to remove the Strange Familiar stuff, and they remonetized us.
Oh, really nice.
I mean, that sucks because I liked having the Strange Familiar stuff up there. I'm going to try and talk to them and see if I can explain to them that I have permission, because we weren't breaking any rules or their guidelines, but it also kind of puts to rest the idea that there's some kind of conspiracy here, that they're just trying to take out fringe shows, because clearly it was just an algorithm thing. They saw that the shows were on both, and they demonetized it to be on the safe side, which I'm assuming is what they did. It was the wrong thing to do. It was the wrong way to go about it, but I understand what they were trying to do with that process, and it didn't have anything to do with the content of the stuff we talk about here.
Right.
And we are about out of time. So, Josh, where can people find you?
Right the heck here at Where Did the Road Go? I hope to be more of a fixture than I have been in the past couple of months now that a lot of this stuff is off my plate. You can also find my other work at joshuacutchin.com. I'm trying to blog a little bit more. It's sort of like a fitness routine for your paranormal lifestyle. I'm trying to do more things. And all the information about my 3 books, Trojan Feast, The Brimstone Deceit, and Thieves in the Night can all be found there. And also, if you really hate your life and want to listen to, 146 hours of Joshua Cutchin straight, all my interviews are logged there as well.
And if people want to visit you at your house, what's your home address?
It is 123 Main Street, Nowheresville, Georgia.
All right.
Don't worry, I know how to get there. Don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah,
all
it
right.
does.
And Adam, where can people find you?
www.conspiranormal.com and www.conspiranormal.podomatic.com. You'll find all the shows and links to Facebook and to email there.
All right, excellent. And I thank you both very much. This has been an interesting conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I want to give an extra special thanks to some people who have gone above and beyond helping me out recently. Allison Cook, Dominic O'Malley, Susan Sabota, Patricia Giaquinta, and Arif Akhtar, as well as all the patrons pledging $10 or more: Super Inframan, Andy McNamara, Charles Beauregard, Craig Cisternos, Scott Morris Everett, Matthias Sunby, Robert Groom, Riker and Stark, Russell Wilcoxon, Sasha Lorg, Christopher Vaughn, Samantha, Carla Mahoney, John Eddy, Chris, Mark Brady, James Hughes, William Lovelace, Kevin Schreck, Alex Bowes, and Alfred Tuttle. Thank you all so very much. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. There was a little more that we're putting up for patrons. After we got done recording, Adam found something else. So we do a very short patron 5 or 10 minute segment talking about that, and Josh gets to say the words he couldn't say on this version of the show. We'll see you next week. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.